Thanks for tuning in.
I am so glad to have you here.
Welcome to episode 2 of State the State podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of State the State. We are so excited to be back with you, our dear listeners, and we hope that you learn something new from our guests. Today's episode is a special and highly relevant one considering the state of the world today as it deals with the COVID-19 pandemic. Given the high level of necessity to curb the virus, several institutions across the world have taken action to promote and participate in an effective pandemic response. These involve providing financial aid, promoting medical research and innovation, and many more. Today, we will be looking at the European Union, or the EU, a political organization composed of numerous European nation-states. We will be looking into the different roles the EU played in addressing the pandemic, as well as diving into some initiatives and efforts it pursued to address the pandemic. We will also be looking into the effectiveness of these initiatives. Before I continue, I would like to introduce to you our special guests. The first person is someone you're already familiar with. He is our resident renowned political analyst in Canada and a professor at the University of British Columbia. Introducing Professor Kael Rizada Borres.
Hello again, Ariel. I'm very excited to be back.
Our next guest is a new face to the podcast. She is also a political analyst that specializes in international politics. She has had various scholarly works published in the International Political Science Review, the Asian Journal of Political Science, and the Philippine Political Science Journal. She is currently the Dean of the Social Sciences and Philosophy Department of the University of the Philippines, Diliman. Please welcome Dr. Jasmine Omandam.
Wow, thank you for the warm welcome. Hello, Ariel and Professor Borres. I'm very honored to be here.
Now that we are all acquainted with each other, let's get right into the topic. As we all know, several international institutions have taken action against the pandemic, and the EU is no exception. Now, what exactly has the EU been doing in addressing the COVID-19 pandemic?
Well, Ariel, after an initially slow response to the COVID-19 pandemic, the EU has really sought to assume a leading role in the international response to the crisis. They've repeatedly called on other countries like America, China, to treat medical technologies as a global public good. When I was a visiting professor at Sciences Po Paris, it was very evident just through conversations with people, with scholars in Paris, that leaders like the French president, Emmanuel Macron, and EU leaders like Ursula von der Leyen and Charles Michel were at the forefront of the global effort to combat the pandemic. Overcoming the coronavirus crisis is not just a health imperative, it's an economic goal, a social aspiration, it's a political need and a precondition to returning to some sort of normalcy. Or more aspirationally, to quote Joe Biden, to build back better. Using this crisis to build a more sustainable socio-economic future. But sometimes finding a way to have a sustainable future is not always easy. For instance, the biggest example was, the twice impeached former president Donald Trump. He took an unequivocally inward turn for multilateralism. This only strengthened EU aspirations to defend multilateralism and international cooperation in response to COVID and its aftermath. Indeed, the COVID crisis is both an opportunity, but it's also a challenge for the EU to play a more prominent global role on health and other cases of the COVID pandemic, in line with its ambitions to become a strong geopolitical factor and also a guardian of multilateralism, which is under threat during these times.
Well said, Professor Borres. To add into that, the EU serves a multitude of roles such as a diplomatic player, a major aid donor, a promoter of a multilateral, equitable response, and a committed international research and innovation leader. Through its dual mandate on domestic international health issues, the EU has the role of bringing much needed leadership, resources, and expertise in order to expertly and effectively combat the pandemic.
I see. So, the EU definitely plays a multitude of roles in the European pandemic response. But what is most important is not only the outlining of roles and responsibilities, but also whether or not these roles and responsibilities have actually been carried out. Dr. Omandam, considering that this is part of your field of expertise, what have been the initiatives done by the EU to address the pandemic?
There have been different initiatives done by the EU, but we'll stick to two prominent ones. The first is the economic policy response, and the second is the provision of safe and effective COVID-19 vaccines. For the economic policy response, it is a fact that the pandemic constitutes an unprecedented challenge with very severe socio-economic consequences. Therefore, as a coordinated and comprehensive strategy is necessary to deal with health emergency needs, to support economic activity, and to prepare the ground for the recovery. Several measures have already been taken at the national and EU levels, as set out in the statement of the Eurogroup in inclusive format of March 16, 2020.
To further add on to the doctor's statement, some of the coordinated actions taken so far at the level of the member states, the EU and the Euro area have been, well, number one, member states have continuously stepped up efforts to support their economies and just the European economy as a whole. The second one is having significant public resources being directed to strengthen the healthcare sector of each nation and civil protection mechanisms, and also to support affected workers and economic sectors affected by this pandemic. Number three is the use of the EU budget, the proposals by the Commission, the EU Commission, to make best use of existing EU budget resources to fight the crisis. That's one part. And also the proposal for a coronavirus response investment was approved by the EU Parliament and the Council and is in force as of this year, April 1st.
Correct, Professor Borres. There has also been the monetary policy, the resolute action taken by European Central Bank to support liquidity and financing condition to households, businesses, and banks, which will help to preserve the smooth provision of credit to the economy. On 18th March 2020, the ECB decided to launch a €750 billion Pandemic Emergency Purchase Program, or PEPP, to expand the range of eligible assets under the Corporate Sector Purchase Program, or CSPP, and to ease the collateral standards. The EU also helped with financial stability through the guidance provided by supervisory authorities to financial institutions on the interpretation and application of the regulatory requirements in the current exceptional circumstances.
How about the provision of safe and effective COVID-19 vaccines? Based on my research, 4 COVID vaccines have already been authorized in the EU, and vaccination started on December 27, 2020 across the Union. The EU has coordinated a joint effort to secure the production of a sufficient quantity of safe and effective COVID-19 vaccines in the EU through advanced purchase agreements with vaccine producers. To this end, the EU has signed 6 agreements with vaccine developers to ensure a solid vaccine portfolio for EU countries. In total, 2.6 billion doses of vaccines have been secured. Is this information accurate, Dr. Omandam?
Yes, together with member states and the World Health Organization, the EU is coordinating a global effort towards universal access to a vaccine. After all, the EU will only be safe if the rest of the world is safe. By August 31, 2021, the EU reached the important milestone of 70% of the EU adult population getting fully vaccinated. As of October 2021, 3 out of 4 adults in the EU have been fully vaccinated.
Wow, it is so good to know that the vaccination programs across the different member states of the EU have been swift. We could only hope that the situation in the Philippines will get better. Right, Doctor?
I sure hope so, Ariel.
Let us answer the third and final question. Have the initiatives been effective?
Well, to answer the question that you made, Ariel, it's safe to say that it has been effective. The EU has ensured crisis management and coordination through the COVID-19 pandemic through constant communication between member states and EU institutions. The EU has also made medical equipment available by creating a common EU stockpile of PPE, personal protective equipment, and also ventilators, which is absolutely important in critical times.
This discussion into the EU and its initiatives during the pandemic has been very insightful. Thank you for your inputs, Professor Borres and Dr. Omandam.
It was an absolute pleasure, Ariel. Thank you for having me again.
Thank you so much, Ariel.
Any final messages?
Get vaccinated. That's the biggest thing that we have to do now.
Please get vaccinated, guys.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of State to State. See you in our next episode.